Thanks for joining us on the John Mendola Show. We are driven by McCarthy Tire and Automotive Centers. Well, we have the pleasure of talking with Dr. Doug Lisle from True North Health. Also works with Dr. John McDougall. And if you check it out, esteemdynamics.org, a wonderful website for you to learn a little bit more about being a little healthier, being a little brighter, and kind of living up to your potential, I guess, so to speak. Dr. Lisle, welcome into the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, John.
Well, there's a lot of things to talk about. I think one of the first things to talk about is a little bit about your background, how you got into what you're doing with this whole psychology thing.
Yes, that sort of. I was, as a young student, I was first interested in being a lawyer, and then my sister did that, so that was out. And then I decided that I was going to be the next Einstein in physics, to help us find out how we could fly spaceships past light, so that we could be like Star Trek. So that lasted about 3 days in my first physics class. I realized it was way too hard. So there wasn't a single girl in the physics class. There was about 17 guys, and I decided that didn't make a lot of sense to study that. So it took a little while later, but I thought psychology seemed a lot more doable and a lot more fun, and that's how I wound up there.
And a little bit about your background. Take us through going through your schooling and then kind of stumbling upon, I guess, what you're doing now. All from a friendship, I guess, when you were quite young. Your best friend your whole life, Alan Goldhammer.
Yes, Dr. Alan Goldhammer and I were friends since we were 8 years old. And he, in our teens, he got very interested in food, and I was less interested. And so he went off to, actually, he decided to become a chiropractor, because they're kind of nutritionally oriented docs. And then he went on to found True North Health Center, which is a facility that specializes in the use of water-only fasting, along with very healthy diets to fix a lot of kind of problems. But while he was doing this, I wasn't that interested in it, and so I branched out and wound up going to school in psychology. I went to UC San Diego for my undergraduate, and then went to my grad school at the University of Virginia. And then from there, I became an academic. I was actually very interested in research, and I then taught at Stanford University for a while, and was in academia for a while. And then I was most interested, though, in actually self-esteem. And so I left academia to sort of pursue different clinical avenues of trying to have people enhance their self-esteem by looking at the problem from a few angles that hadn't really been considered before.
And Dr. Lisle, again, we're getting a little bit into what you do and teaching at places like Stanford. Obviously, the IQ has to be up there, but the way your approach seems to be at a level where the average person, or maybe even a little below, could grab it, grasp it, and then possibly act on it to work on themselves, to try to improve themselves, whether it's through eating or some other habits, maybe to get themselves going in a little better direction.
Absolutely. The truth is that I forget who said this, but if a reasonably bright child can't understand it, it's probably too difficult for adults to use. And so the truth is that I can explain these concepts, and we can make it sound very fancy, but we don't have to. We can actually break this down to the experiences of a reasonably bright 12-year-old, and it's going to turn out that they're going to be able to get what I'm talking about, and so therefore basically all adults can make use of this perspective and really helping them understand some of the challenges that we naturally wind up having to face whenever we're going to try to make positive changes.
And one of those challenges I think we've all faced in our lives is the pleasure trap, a book that you and Dr. Alan Goldhammer wrote. Tell us a little bit about the whole concept of the pleasure trap.
Yeah, the pleasure trap is actually a fairly simple idea, and that is that we were designed to have a certain motivational responses to certain kinds of things in the environment. Namely, the most important ones would be food and sex. So we're designed to be very attracted to food and very attracted to sexual opportunities. We're also designed to be very discriminating about those potentials. So just because it's food doesn't mean you're all crazy about it. So if it's a very sour apple, you're designed to realize that apple doesn't have very many calories in it, and it's probably pretty hard to chew. And therefore, you should be looking to see if there's a riper apple, on the tree. And so as soon as you'll taste that riper apple, you will prefer it. So you have preferences that actually help you make decisions that if we were to drill down into the details, we would find out that the decisions that you prefer or the preferences that you have are actually more efficient when it comes to survival or reproductive problems. So the problem of getting enough food to eat or enough calories is aided by your taste preferences for things that are sweet and things that are rich, for example, in fat and protein. So you simply prefer things that have more calories or the calories are more easily accessible. That's why, for example, people would like ice cream, because ice cream is very rich in fat and sugar, so it has a lot of calories in it, and also it's soft, so you don't have to work very hard to chew it and to digest it. So the things we prefer are efficient, and for example, with respect to sexuality, we prefer mates that are efficient in terms of their reproductive potential. So, for example, people that are very sexually attractive are actually very efficient in terms of gene reproducers, because the children that you would have with them would be very attractive children, and therefore it would be very easy for them to get mates in the next generation. So again, these efficiency processes, efficiency concepts, are weaving their way through the preferences of not just humans but all animals. So the pleasure trap, so even that sounds pretty complicated, you can see that fundamentally it's actually pretty simple. And the same reason that you would like a job that would pay twice as much as another job, if the work wasn't twice as difficult, you would do it because it's more efficient. And so in this same way, that when we apply this to, for example, dietary problems, we know that the big problem of the world right now is that people are eating too much rich food. So the problem used to be that people didn't get enough food. So even early in the 20th century, there was a lot of times when there was a lot of people going hungry. So today, it's very rare for people to go hungry. There are some hungry people still in the world. But actually, even in Africa today, more people die of diseases of dietary excess, things like heart attacks and strokes, than die of starvation. So even there, in our very poorest places, we have a problem of people essentially exceeding the amount of calories they ought to be eating for optimum health. So the pleasure trap is a simple idea, and that is that your natural preferences, in the case of food, are to simply eat the richest possible food calorically that you can get your hands on. That very simple behavioral program, is in all human minds. And so that worked beautifully in an environment where there's whole natural food, and your job was to distinguish between a ripe apple and a sour apple. But today, instead of a ripe apple and a sour apple, you might have a chocolate apple, which is a completely artificial product that is artificially extremely rich in calories. In this case, it would be about 10 times as rich. A chocolate apple is 10 times as calorically dense as the sweetest apple that you could ever get in the orchard. And so as a result of that, people would naturally prefer the richer food because their taste preference mechanism is for the richest caloric resource. And so as a result, people are driven now in an environment where there's commercial ingenuity that essentially can only survive financially by making the food as rich as possible, you would expect that people's preferences would drive them to eat the richest possible food, and that's what they do. And so when they recognize they've got problems because they're struggling with their weight, and they've got diabetes or they've got whatever the problem is, and they're told that what they need to do is eat healthier food, even once they know what food to eat, it's very hard for them to do so because their natural programming simply has a simple message: eat the richest food. So this is what we call the pleasure trap, that the pleasure-seeking mechanism is trapped by the confusion that the modern environment causes, and it's very difficult for people to get out of.
And you kind of break it down as easily as you can. I mean, as far as you're concerned, people can eat on, I guess, an A through F scale, so to speak. And sometimes you could get an A plus, and sometimes, you may just want to shoot for the A, but, it's better than eating from an F. Tell us about your basic scheme there with that.
Right. This came as a result of an argument that I had with Dr. Goldhammer. I explained to him about 10 years ago that I believed that people really did not know what was healthy food and unhealthy food, that they knew somewhat, but they had a lot of confusion. And he was so in his own insulated world where it's like an echo chamber where the only people he's talking to were knowledgeable. He actually did not think that this was true. And so we happened to have been working on our book at the time at the Pleasure Trap, and he had invited me to come to Hawaii with he and his wife and their family. And I said, sure, I'll come. But of course, when you do this, you're now a victim of his evil plan, which was to get me to work with him all week. So we're working and arguing about everything under the sun, which is what co-authors do. And we were on the beach one afternoon, and we had this argument and about, do people really know what to eat? And I said, I'm quite certain that they do not. And in fact, I believe that they will think that fish is an A and chicken is a B and beef is a C. And he said, no, don't you really think that they know? And I said, absolutely they don't know. And they also all believe that dairy products are an A, except for ice cream, which is a B. And so it just so happened that these three young couples, were together walking towards us on the beach. Now you can imagine these people were in their 30s, and so they were obviously there as a group. So you can imagine how highly educated a group of three young couples is if they're all on the beach in Hawaii together. These are not average people. It's absolutely college educated coming out of their ears. And so I said, okay, well, you ask them. So I said, but you got to be fair. Don't cue them. And he did it right. He said, we're writing a book, and we conduct science on this issue, and we're trying to get a feel for what different kinds of foods people think are the healthiest. And he went through the whole thing. It came out exactly as I planned, that they thought that fish was an A, chicken was a B, and beef was a C. And so, I won that argument all hands down. And so it occurred to me that this concept of how to score food with respect to a grading scale could be very useful for people because they actually didn't know. And so through this, I've come up with what I call the continuum of evil. In this business, people will always ask you, can I eat this? Is that legal? What about this? Is that legal? What about coffee? What about olive oil? What about what about sugar? What about wine? Everybody's always trying to figure out what's evil and what isn't evil. And my explanation is that there's a continuum of evil. And the very worst things that I believe that we can eat are what I would call F's. And the F's would be fried animal food. I think that's probably the worst food that you can eat. Then I go up, the next thing that I think is the next worst thing is what I call the dairy products, which I give about a D to. And most dairy products are, kind of mediocre for people. People can utilize them, but they tend to be quite problematic for a large number of people. And then the next thing after that is what the C range. That's where I would put refined carbohydrates, which most people, things like white flour and so forth, most people, nutritionists often would put those down at an F, but they're mistaken. That if you actually look at the problems that those products cause, they're fairly benign for humans and not nearly as problematic as animal food and dairy products specifically, as well as fried animal food. So the next thing up in the scale is what I call sort of pretty good food, or what I call sort of junky health food. And I don't mean that pejoratively. I mean that in the sense of pretty good. So, a veggie burger is a much better thing for you to eat than a hamburger. And so this is the type of thing that I'm talking about. I would say whole wheat bread, is better for you than white bread, which is, we would give white bread a C and we give whole wheat bread a B. And so in this way, I try to give people a feel for what things are. And then A, the foods that are in the A range, those are all the things in your produce aisle. Those are your whole natural plant foods, and those are outstanding. And so my job in life is to try to encourage people to, at least aim for a B in their health, or maybe even an A. And in order to do that, just consider every meal to be like a little quiz. And sometimes you're not going to do perfectly, and sometimes once in a blue moon you can even get an F on a quiz, and you can still get an A in the class if you do enough things well. So, but the idea is to know what score you're getting, with the habits that you have. And so if you want to do a little bit better, you need to know which direction to go.
Great explanation, and of course people are always looking for the next thing, and there's always seems to be a next thing every few weeks or every couple months. Somebody has something on one of these talk shows or what have you, and all I eat is protein, and why would you touch a carb, or carbs only. People are kind of all over the place with that type of stuff, and I guess there's so many different body types, and that's where we get into the gene types and the circuitry, I guess, maybe, as you say. So if we have an example, I guess, of a family of, 4 or 5 lawyers out of 10 people in the family, there's a chance the next generation there could be a lawyer in there. Can we say the same thing about if there's 4 or 5 people overweight in the family, excess weight, that the odds are they're going to be that way because of some of that gene circuitry, so to speak?
Yes, I think the lawyer thing is basically a perfect analogy. That it's probably even stronger than the lawyer thing, but pretty similar. So if you have a family full of lawyers, you got a couple things going. Number one, they're people that like to argue, and they are also verbal people and also bright. So not everybody that's bright is verbal, and not everybody that's verbal is bright, and not everybody that's bright and verbal likes to argue. But those 3 characteristics, if they're all, which they're all heavily genetic in origin, and you have a little social structure around, you got yourself very likely a lawyer in the next generation. In the same way, there's no lawyering in nature, but there is in our society. There was no overweight people in the natural history of humans. That's not a natural phenomenon, but it is if you have an environmental landscape that is full of very rich food, at which point people are going to struggle because they're always going to want the rich food because of the nature of the pleasure trap. And if you have the genes to be a big man or a very curvy female, those genes are absolutely going to bias you towards more trouble in terms of weight control with the pleasure trap. So keep in mind that nobody is actually built to naturally be overweight, and they will not be if they're eating whole natural foods. But if they eat any food with any amount of processing in the food, it's going to become increasingly problematic for the people that have the big genes.
You've given so many examples over time, and I'm fortunate enough to have listened to many of your videos and some of your audio clips that you've had over time, and maybe some people are just kind of learning about Dr. Doug Lisle at esteemeddynamics.org. But one of the things that you talk about over time is having some goals and maybe hitting an 80% mark during the course of a week. So if it's 3 meals a day is the goal times 7 days, if you could be on target for 80% of those meals, that's a great goal if you could hit it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that one of the problems that people have is that they have a tendency to have an all or nothing psychology. So they have an all or nothing psychology that they're either doing this new diet, whatever it is, or they're not doing it. And the concept of doing it quite well is a little bit lost on them. And so for me, I think it's important that the number one dietary mistake that I actually see in all the people that I talk to is that they are not eating enough of what we're going to call complex carbohydrates, also known as starches. Now, people will react when they hear the word starch because they think of something tasty and something that you add to other things that has no flavor or something. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about a similar molecule, but we're talking about the starch molecule that is associated with the foods that we call complex carbohydrates. So things like potatoes, rice, and beans have starch molecules in them. Corn has starch molecules in them. These are big, long chain carbohydrates, and in order to be digested, these chains have to be broken apart. It goes through a digestive process, and as a result, they are absorbed slowly and very effectively, and therefore used over time after you eat them. This is in contrast to what we're going to call refined carbohydrates, where the starch molecules have been broken apart. So, and simple sugars, which are not starches, things like honey and sugar, are absorbed very quickly and very easily. The starch molecule is, in whole natural foods, is embedded with a tremendous, amount of fiber. Some of that starch molecule is not actually digestible, which is outstanding. It's just how it should be. So when you eat it, you aren't getting every single calorie in the drawer. You're getting a percentage of the calories, and then some of the materials are in your digestive system very appropriately, helping move your material through the system, as well as keeping you very high water content in the whole digestive system, so that you are, as John McDougall likes to say, you are born as a starch eater. And human beings very clearly, we can tell by genetic studies, have eaten very large quantities of these starches in our natural history. And so when the biggest mistake that I make, not that I make, but that I hear, is I hear people trying to go on diets and lose weight, and they think that they should be avoiding carbohydrates, which is an enormous mistake. You would like to avoid refined carbohydrates, white flour products, things of that nature. Those aren't going to help us in weight loss. But carbohydrate-based foods in general are absolutely your friends. Rice, beans, potatoes, corn, even wheat pasta. These things are absolutely exactly the direction that you want to go. They are very low-calorie food. They are very health-supporting. They're very low in fat, and they are the food that will keep people essentially built the way they're supposed to be built. I have many people that swear up and down that I've heard it all about how carbohydrates make everybody fat. But I just want to point out to people that there are 2 billion Asians eating all the rice they want, and none of them are fat. Okay? When people get fat, it's because they're eating high-fat diets as well as high refined carbohydrate diets. People that eat high natural starch diets, rice, beans, potatoes, the traditional diets that you'll see that have been the bedrock of civilization for thousands of years, when people eat those traditional diets, they do not get fat. And so that's the single biggest mistake that I see people make.
Dr. Lisle, how about a target? And again, everybody's a little bit different. Their circuitry, I guess, their genetic makeup. But what's a goal, I guess, for somebody. Is it that 4 to 6 week mark? Is that what you want to kind of hit to come up with a goal? Whether it's for just your meals or if there's a number with pounds, if people are looking to actually lose weight?
Yeah, I actually like to have people look out about 4 to 6 weeks. So I have them pick a target on the calendar that is somehow meaningful for them or will mark it. So maybe their birthday is out about 6 weeks, or an anniversary, or there's a holiday, right? So right now we're sort of towards the end of June. We don't have a real good target date right now, so we would have to just use August the 1st. And so I like people to essentially set goals that are about 6 weeks out. And when it comes to weight loss, what I want them to do is I want them to have a daily or, like a weekly check sheet that I call starch targets that has them orient their diet around the big starches or the big complex carbohydrates. So I want them to, so in the case of starch targets, there's 6 what I call these targets a day. So I have 6 check boxes for people. And if your people want to get this little checkbox sheet, I will email it to you, John, so that you've got it available for your folks. But I have, for each day of the week, we have 3 check boxes, one for starch for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then we have fruit and salad and exercise. So we have a total of 6 starch targets a day, or 42 in a week. And so my goal for people is to hit 80% or 34 out of those 42 starch targets every week. And hopefully, so I don't worry about things that people are doing wrong. I want them to get used to doing things right. So whether or not they have a Snickers bar or a couple of glasses of wine or whatever it is that they might do that we know is a little bit not ideal, the point is I don't care about that. I care about them learning the right things to do when it comes to the things that need to be included. And so I want them to kind of keep score and orient their health behavior around what I call the starch targets. And usually, if they keep this up, and which only takes like 15 seconds a day to check off your little boxes, that 6 weeks later, if they notice that they've lost 2 or 3 pounds, then we know we have made serious progress and we're on the right track. One of the things that is the most frustrating about, for example, weight, is that people have been miseducated by our culture, by the advertising agencies, brilliantly tricking them into thinking that weight loss should be quite effortless and very, very fast. This is a big mistake. The truth of the matter is, well, like for example, Slim Fast, whoever invented that, I understand that this guy made $1 billion off of this. And they had a catchphrase. I don't see their ads on TV now, but the catchphrase was, "Give us a week and we'll take off the weight." And what they had people do was to drink these little chocolate shakes. Now, I didn't even see what the ingredients were on these chocolate shakes, and it doesn't matter, because I already know the key ingredient in the chocolate shakes. And the key ingredient was the fact that they were very, very low in sodium. So people would eat a trashy diet of drinking chocolate shakes for a week. That's enough to make you sick. And they might have been even a very high fat. So the people did not lose any fat. But what they would lose is they might lose 5 or 10 pounds of water, because they would go from a normal or high sodium diet to no sodium in the week that they're drinking chocolate shakes. And so in your body, if you have very low sodium in your diet for a while, your body will actually shed water, and you will the kidneys will actually excrete the existing sodium that you have, and you will wind up with a lower water content in your body. People will step on the scale and they will be thrilled, and they'll think that they lost, if they lost 7 pounds, they'll think, well, some of it might have been water, but maybe I only lost 5 pounds real. Well, they didn't lose anything. And so they're very out of touch. And of course, a week later, they eat 1 bag of potato chips, and 3 days later, all the weight is back, but then they think they're a bad person because they ate the potato chips or something else. They're not. The truth of the matter is that their fat content has not changed at all. What can change dramatically is what the water content is in somebody's body, because that is the majority of your weight is water. And so when the system, for various reasons, particularly sodium content in the diet, moves up and down, people can think that they're gaining and losing weight, or i.e. their body composition is changing, but it is not changing. All that's happening is water content rises and falls very easily. When it comes to actual weight loss tends to not be fast. It has a tendency to shed maybe a few hundred calories a day, not a lot. And so therefore, a pound of fat is about 4,000 calories. So legitimately, it might take a person a couple of weeks to lose a pound of fat. And it might take them a month to lose 2 pounds of fat. And it might, in 6 weeks, they'd very likely lose 3 pounds of fat. Now, this is very healthy, slow, steady, good choices leading to good results. But people, if they do not know this about what the real pace is when people lose weight, they will flip out and they'll get impatient and they'll quit. So it's important that they know what the appropriate expectations are.
And different people say different things. And, of course, we believe they're all myths where somebody says, hey, you do something for 3 weeks, it's a habit. That's going to be ingrained in you. Or 6 weeks, you got something licked. But the truth of the matter is different people have different, I think I could use the term circuitry, as you would say. And
yes.
Even though you may get some momentum for 2 weeks, 3 weeks in a row and think, I got this, it's going to be a battle for you, if you in particular have an issue with weight, for the rest of your life. It's a daily battle. You could get in some good habits, but there's going to be some challenges, and as you would say, a pleasure trap somewhere along the way.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, John. The pleasure trap is always just around the corner. The pleasure trap is actually, it's everywhere in the modern environment. Now, I like to. People have a tendency to believe that the reason why they're not sticking to a healthy program is because they're stressed, they got emotional issues, et cetera, et cetera. So people believe that they eat for emotional reasons, and they'll swear up and down to you that this is true. But this is really fundamentally not true. The truth of the matter is that you are so people, for example, if they make some sort of indulgent eating choices and eat a bunch of junk, they think that the reason they did it is maybe they had some emotional turmoil going on. Maybe they were celebrating. Maybe they're medicating. Maybe they're lonely or bored or whatever. Okay? This is actually not what's happening. What's happening is something much, much more important and profound to actually understand what's going on. What's actually happening is that the pleasure trap is essentially surrounding you. It is everywhere, okay? You're designed by nature to essentially get as much energy as you can, essentially get things as efficiently as you can get them. And this is key for the survival of the organism. It's designed for efficiency. And so probably the most important energy-conserving device that you have is your eyes. Because your eyes can look across a landscape and know that it's either worth hiking over there or it's not worth hiking over there. Also, another important feature of your energy conservation machinery is your memory. So you can actually remember where things were very, very good. So you remember where the ripe peaches are, and you remember where the alligator is. In other words, you're designed with a memory that is not supposed to forget anything that's important. So you can imagine how this human being, as it bangs around the landscape, it doesn't forget what McDonald's French fries taste like, nor does it forget where they're located. In other words, it knows where things are, and it's constantly updating its program as it says, where is the next easiest bunch of energy that I can get my hands on? So when people go against that programming and effectively, essentially try to neutralize the pleasure trap with an organized life and a lot of diligence and a tremendous amount of motivation, When they do this, and they do it very well, they might do it well for a week, or they might do it well for a year. But the point is that to do so is not very easy. You're effectively like in a submarine 2 miles under the surface of the ocean, and there is tremendous pressure on that submarine as water is trying to get into the submarine. And if there's as much as a little rivet loose, the water will try to work its way in. And if it can open up a little bit of a rivet, it'll open up more and more, and then the whole thing is in serious trouble. That is because there's tremendous pressure outside that isn't equal to the pressure that's inside. The same thing is going on with people and their food. There is tremendous pressure that the environment is essentially a dynamic system where the preferences of the person are saying, boy, do I want the rich food. Boy, do I want the rich food. Boy, do I want the rich food. And the rich food is everywhere, and it is inexpensive, and it is easy to get your hands on it. In other words, everything about you is designed to take advantage of the modern environment with the very rich food. It takes extraordinary diligence and motivation to actually act against that. And yet when people stumble at their process of trying to act against it, they then shrug their shoulders and they try to come up with a reason why this happened. Oh, well, I had this problem at work, or oh, I had this problem in my... No, you don't have to come up with that reason. We don't need that as an excuse or an explanation, and we also don't need to get sidetracked into mistakes. The truth of the matter is much simpler. The truth is that you are not designed to live with a healthy habits. Okay? You are designed by a simple algorithm that says, eat the richest food in the environment. That is the only algorithm that was needed to make sure that human beings maximize their likelihood of survival in an ancient environment of caloric scarcity. Okay? When you put that individual in an environment today, we have a total nightmare. Okay? Of course, almost everybody is stumbling all over the place. And no matter how big the motivation is for them, doesn't matter. The little algorithm that's in the head says, keep going for the richest possible food. To act against that is a lifelong battle of organization and the development of habit. It is not easy to do it, and it isn't a matter of doing it for 3 weeks and then you've got it. It's not even close.
So going back, I guess, to almost that bell curve theory, and I may be a little off, correct me if I'm wrong with that, but so on one end you may have the freak, as you would call it, I guess, at one end, like an Alan Goldhammer, who may be able to eat the same things every day and be one of the healthiest people you know. On the other end, you may have that person that may be able to eat those French fries or poor food choices and kind of survive on that. And then there's a large portion in that belly part that's kind of going through those battles with the different genetic makeup.
Absolutely. There are... all of us have, a little bit of different angle on this problem. There are people like my friend Ellen who are naturally very, they're not very adventurous. And so once they have found something that works for some of their goals, they can just do it over and over again. Okay? Think about some guy that all he ever wants to do in this life is go bowling on Thursday night. Like, that's all he wants to do. Like, he's not interested in anything else. I mean, it's kind of fascinating that, like, if the World Series is on that Thursday night, he doesn't need to watch the World Series. It doesn't bother him any. No, he's just going to go bowling, okay? Well, those are not typical. Those are not typical people. Most people have an adventurous streak where they like novelty and variety. And so if you are normal, or God forbid, you are more adventurous than normal, then eating the same very healthy, sort of narrowly prescribed foods gets to be frustrating, and you feel like you're in a trap, and you will rebel. And then we got a problem, okay? Because we're going to rebel towards foods that are very rich because they're the most interesting ones, and then we're sort of into the trap. So yes, and then there's this huge difference in people's natural personalities. And so if you are a person that is much more adventurous, then you must actually go to the trouble of developing a wider repertoire of a lot of healthy foods so that you don't get bored.
Dr. Doug Lisle here on the John Mendola Show. It is esteemdynamics.org. So many more questions to have, but Dr. Lisle, he's got some other stuff going on in his life. He's doing some great stuff, of course, with Dr. John McDougall and what he does at True North Health with Dr. Alan Goldhammer, his best friend. Again, esteemdynamics.org for more information with Dr. Doug Lisle. Doug, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for some incredible information.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, John.
All right, psychologist Doug Lisle here on the John Mendola Show. We are driven by McCarthy Tire and Automotive Centers.